She failed every test, missed every target, and was one signature away from being sent home. Until a SEAL commander handed her a folded piece of paper and said only 6 words. "Private Carter, you have new orders." The California sun blazed over the training field like a golden blade. On the scorching sand of Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego, the drill commands echoed repeatedly, blending with the rhythmic stomp of boots, the drumbeat fueling the steel-bound resolve of those forged into Marines. Amid the long line of recruits marching in unison, one woman stumbled slightly, her shoulders straining under the weight of her M16. She was Emily Carter, 25, from Texas, the daughter of a Marine veteran, once the pride of her family. 3 weeks earlier, Emily had walked through the gates of the base with eyes burning bright and a silent promise. She would never let her father down. But now, that promise was cracking, piece by piece. She had failed every test, missed every target, and scored below the minimum on every physical exam. Every morning, the 4:30 a.m. wake-up call no longer stirred determination, only marked the beginning of another day of defeat. The irony was painful. Emily had once been the top competitive shooter in the state of Texas, capable of hitting targets 800 meters away, even in strong wind. Yet here, among recruits hardened by discipline, she had become a flaw in the perfect machinery of Marine Corps training. On the range, Staff Sergeant Marcus Hill, the notoriously strict instructor, roared over the sound of gunfire. "Carter, what the hell are you doing out there? The target's only 10 meters away and you still missed?" Sweat soaked through her shirt. Dust clung to her face, but Emily responded with her usual line. "No excuse, Sergeant." Hill stepped closer, his gaze cold as steel. "You failed your weapons qualification 3 times. Your run time's below standard, and your tactical drills are a disaster. Do you even know where you stand, Carter? This isn't a place for people who want to try. This is for those ready to sacrifice." The words cut deep, like a blade through pride. Emily stood at attention, silent. But in her eyes something was breaking. A fragile mix of shame and defiance, of wanting to prove herself but had built her life around. That evening, in the noisy mess hall, Emily sat alone in a corner. The tray before her had gone cold, the air thick with the scent of iron and sweat. She thought of her father, the man who once wore the Marine uniform with quiet pride. Of her mother, who had held back tears as she watched her daughter board the transport bus. And of herself, the young woman who once believed she was born to wear that uniform. Now, she wasn't so sure. Every dream, every ounce of belief, seemed to melt under the crushing weight of a brutal truth. She wasn't good enough. Or worse, maybe she had never been meant for this. Emily took a deep breath, ready to stand up and walk away. But just then, a shadow stopped beside her table. A man in a combat uniform, no insignia, no nameplate, stood before her. His expression was calm, yet carried the kind of authority that made everyone instinctively straighten up. He spoke softly, just enough for her to hear. "Private Carter, I need you to come with me." Emily looked up. The man's eyes were cold but deep, as if he knew everything about her. And with that single sentence, a completely different chapter of Emily's life began. The mess hall seemed to slow down. Amid the clatter of cutlery, the chatter, and the steady hum of the military radio, Emily could hear the beat of her own heart. The man standing before her wore a combat uniform, no rank insignia, no announcement of his grade. But from the moment she met his gaze, she knew he was no ordinary man. "Private Carter, I need you to come with me." His voice was low and decisive, not loud, not harsh, but carrying a weight that made any protest pointless. Emily rose instinctively, Curious eyes followed them, but no one dared to speak. She fell in step behind the stranger and left the mess hall. Outside, the air was cool. The wind stirred the marine flags as the San Diego dusk settled. They passed rows of buildings Emily had never been allowed to enter, a guarded checkpoint, and a gate stamped with a sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." A strange feeling began to grow in her. "Sir, am I under investigation?" she asked. The man did not look back. He answered tersely, "No, Carter. You're about to be reassessed." They stopped before a small unmarked building, gray walls and a steel door. Inside was an odd room, less like a military office and more like a lab. Files, maps, and satellite images covered the surfaces. The man sat behind a desk. "Sit down, Carter." "Sir, I request permission to remain standing." "That's not a request." She sat, back straight, hands folded on her thighs. He opened a file on the desk, speaking calmly. "I am Commander Nathan Reynolds, SEAL Team 4. I didn't come here to talk about your failures." "So, what did you come here for, sir?" she asked. "To talk about what you are afraid of." Reynolds flipped to the first page. The file wasn't a military record. It contained old photos of Emily, a 17-year-old girl smiling brightly on a winner's podium, holding a sporting rifle. Texas Tactical Shooting Championship 2018. First place, rifle category. First place, tactical pistol. Third overall, ahead of shooters with 20 years of service. Remember that, Carter? Emily nodded slightly, and I felt nothing. No fear, no tremor, just quiet. So quiet that it horrified me. She paused and inhaled. I realized I was very good at ending other people's lives. And that scared me. Reynolds studied her for a long moment. There was no judgment in his gaze, only observation, slow, precise, as if he were seeing something she had not seen herself. "Carter, you are not afraid because you are weak. You are afraid because you understand the value of life. And that is something a true warrior needs to have." Those words made Emily lift her head. For the first time, she saw not contempt in the commander's eyes, but recognition. The look she had waited her whole life to receive. Reynolds opened a drawer and produced an envelope sealed with red wax. Stamped across it in bold letters were the words, "Special Operations Training Command. Confidential orders. Private Carter," he said slowly. "Your training here is over. You have a new assignment. Open it." Emily looked at the envelope as if she were holding her future. Inside was an order. Reassignment. Building 9, Coronado Naval Annex. Tactical Range Bravo. Full combat gear required. Live ammunition authorized. She looked up. "Sir, what is this?" "It's a chance for you to stop living like a loser and start living like someone chosen." Reynolds leaned back, half smiling, half serious. "Some orders don't send you to the battlefield, Carter. They take you to the place where you will find yourself." Emily gripped the paper until her knuckles went white. Inside her, fear and hope collided like opposing tides. She did not know what awaited her, only that for the first time in weeks, her hands no longer trembled. The room was so silent that Emily could hear the faint rustle of paper in her hands. The order inside the red-sealed envelope was still warm, as if it had been signed moments before he handed it to her. She looked up, her eyes still shadowed with doubt. "Sir, is this a retraining order? But I was just recommended for discharge." Reynolds folded his arms, his voice measured, each word dropping heavy as spent brass. "No, Carter. This is a redirection order." Redirection? You don't fit what they're teaching here, but that doesn't mean you have no value. It simply means you were born for a different program. He stood and walked toward the window where the evening light cut through the thick blinds. His silhouette stretched tall and still against the wall, the stance of a man who had seen too much, things others were never meant to know. There are operations the world will never hear about, units that the Department of Defense itself denies exist, and people chosen not because they are the strongest, but because they understand the cost of strength. He turned, meeting her gaze squarely. You're one of those people, Carter. Emily said nothing, gripping the paper as if it might dissolve if she let go. Sir, why me? I deliberately failed. I hid what I could do. That's not the quality of a soldier. Reynolds stepped closer, stopping right in front of her. You hid your ability because you were afraid, and that fear proves you understand the worth of human life. Most people only know how to follow orders, but someone like you knows when not to pull the trigger. In that moment, the room seemed to contract around them. There was no sound but their breathing and the heartbeat of a fate being rewritten. Reynolds opened a cabinet and drew out a small metal case. He placed it on the desk and flipped it open. Inside was a silver insignia engraved with a simple symbol, an eye within a circle, and beneath it, a line of small text. Sentinel Program. This is the Watched her for a long moment, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. Not as a command, but as a passing of truth. Everyone is born twice, Carter. Once they come into the world. The second time, when they understand why they're here. The words struck her like a spark in the dark. Suddenly, every failed test, every silent tear, every stray bullet began to make sense. I'll go, sir, she said quietly. Reynolds nodded, a brief smile crossing his face, warm yet solemn. He extended his hand. Welcome to the Sentinel program. When she shook it, his hand was rough, calloused, the hand of someone who had carried weapons and returned from missions no one would ever hear about. That handshake, she knew, had just changed her life forever. As she left the room, Emily strolled down the hallway, the red envelope still clenched in her hand. The sun was setting over the training yard, casting orange-gold light across the gray concrete walls. She didn't know what she was walking into, only that she was no longer afraid to fail for the first time since joining the Corps. Maybe, she thought, the greatest fear isn't not being good enough, but being good enough to change everything. The next morning, the San Diego sky was veiled in a soft gray mist. Emily Carter stood before Building 9, tucked deep within a restricted zone she had never been permitted to enter. No nameplate, no guards. Only a thick steel door and a bold red warning sign. Authorized personnel only. She handed the red-sealed order to the soldier posted outside. He gave a silent nod, entered a code, and the door slid open. The outside world vanished when it shut behind her, as if she'd stepped into another dimension. Inside was a facility unlike any she'd seen. Sleek metal corridors, walls embedded with hidden cameras, and glass panels glowing with soft blue light. At the far end of the hallway stood a woman waiting for her. Tall, athletic, and striking in a way that came only from surviving hundreds of missions. No rank insignia, only a name tag. Ava Monroe. Private Carter? Yes, ma'am. Call me Captain Monroe. From this moment on, I decide whether you're truly worthy of the order in your hand. Her voice was calm, but her eyes seemed to see straight through to the soul. Monroe led her through a series of automatic doors. Beyond them opened a vast, blindingly white chamber, Tactical Range Bravo, a live-fire training arena. Emily inhaled sharply. The room gleamed with cold precision, moving targets, tracking sensors, and real combat simulation systems. On a nearby table lay rows of weapons she had never seen in any Marine training depot, from long-range sniper rifles to custom tactical prototypes. Monroe gestured toward the table. "Choose your weapon." "I'm allowed to pick any of them?" "Here, Carter, we don't chain people to regulations. We care about only one thing, whether you can control yourself." Emily reached for the MK-13 sniper rifle, the weapon she had once dreamed of firing. Her hands trembled briefly, then steadied as if her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Monroe spoke evenly. "Target, 800 meters, temperature 26 degrees, wind southwest, level 2, time 20 seconds. Emily aimed, inhaled deeply. The world shrank to a single thread, breath, scope, heartbeat. But Monroe never scolded her. She only said, "Mistakes here save lives out there. And if it hurts, that means you still have humanity." At night, Emily couldn't sleep. She'd lie awake, listening to the ocean wind whisper through the vent. Every drill drained her to exhaustion, yet everyone taught her something deeper. She wasn't afraid of the gun. She wasn't afraid of blood. She was afraid of not doing the right thing. One afternoon, Monroe joined her in the break room, her tone softer than usual. "I know that look," she said. "I had it too, the day I realized I was dangerously good at what I do." Emily glanced up. Monroe's smile was brief, knowing. "Carter, there's a difference between a killer and a guardian. Their skills are the same, but their hearts are not." The words carved deep into Emily's mind. She realized everything she was learning wasn't to make her the strongest, but to make her wise enough to know when strength must stop. On the final day of her initial training phase, Monroe handed her the last test, a hostage rescue simulation. Complete the mission with 0 civilian casualties. 12 moving targets lit up on the display. Emily moved with precision, calculating each shot and firing only when necessary. When it was over, not a single civilian was hit. Monroe nodded, her eyes glinting with rare pride. "Reynolds was right. You never failed, Carter. You were just waiting for the world to be ready for you." She paused, resting a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Welcome," she said quietly, "to the ranks of those who protect from the shadows." Night fell over Coronado Base. Winds from the Pacific swept through, carrying the taste of salt and the chill of the waves. Emily Carter sat alone on the rooftop railing, her sniper rifle resting beside her, the moonlight glinting off its steel barrel. Below, the lights of the compound shimmered in pale ribbons, stretching into the dark. From a distance came the faint echoes of training, the synchronized thud of boots, sharp commands, the ringing of metal against metal. That rhythm, once a reminder of her failures, no longer made her feel out of place. She closed her eyes. In the silence, memories from 3 weeks of failure at San Diego came flooding back. Sweat-drenched mornings, missed shots, the contempt in her comrade's eyes, Sergeant Hill's cold voice. Everything that once broke her down became the foundation she stood upon. From deep within, she whispered to herself, "Maybe failure isn't what makes us weak. Maybe it's the test that asks if we're ready for the path truly meant for us. The door creaked open behind her. Captain Ava Monroe stepped out carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. Still awake? Couldn't sleep, ma'am. No one ever sleeps the night before their first mission. Ava set the cup down beside her. Tomorrow, you won't be a trainee anymore. You'll officially be a Sentinel operator. Emily looked out toward the sea, her voice soft but firm. Do you ever get scared, working in the shadows, knowing no one will ever know your name, or that you saved them? Ava smiled, one of the rare smiles Emily had ever seen from her. No, because we don't do this to be known. We do this so that no one has to know what could have happened. In that instant, Emily understood what every drill, every sleepless night, every drop of sweat had been leading to. She wasn't being trained to win wars. She was being trained to stop them before they began. Far out over the ocean, distant lights flickered. Somewhere out there were people who would never appear in the news, yet stood watch, keeping the world safe one silent night at a time. And now, she was one of them. No one else has to suffer loss. The words closed their conversation, but opened a new chapter in Emily Carter's life. She was no longer the failed soldier. She had become an unseen guardian, watching over the world in silence, where victories came without medals, and peace was the only reward. Emily picked up her rifle, the moonlight gleaming across its barrel, and at that moment she realized that her old fear had never been weakness. It had only been the first step toward true courage. There are those who protect in the light, and those who protect in the dark. Both keep the world turning. The world will never know your name, Carter, but it will live in peace because you chose to stand in the shadows. And that is all the glory a true soldier ever needs. Sometimes, failure is just a disguise, a way for life to test whether we're brave enough to walk the path meant for us. If Emily Carter's story made you think about your own, please share it, so someone else might find strength in their darkness too. And if you believe that courage doesn't only live in the light, stay with us here at Deep Life Tales. Like, share, comment, and subscribe, not just to hear another story, but to find your story within it.